What's something before you were born that you would have liked to experience? I'd like to go to a World's Fair. Good choice. As a little kid went to NYC 64 twice. It was very cool. GM Futurama Undersea Cities. Driving a Ford Galaxy convertible. Bell Picture Phone. Travelers Insurance Red Umbrella Building. GE Fusion Power Demo. Unisphere with John Glenn's Orbit. Living in a cave bashing things with a large stick. I would love to experience a big city right now in its early days, with the knowledge I have of it now. When I biked off Amsterdam in the morning and I see all the beautiful buildings built in the 1600s, I just want to know what happened in the same street 400 years ago. It'd probably be disease ridden. 50s diners. Well, you only have to wait 35 more years. Venice and the Renaissance. Florence for me. Teotihuacan in its prime. To a completely ancient and vast society set in a jungle. It's a little further back than everybody else's suggestion, but it would be so fascinating. Tenochtitlan was the Aztec capital built directly on a lake. That would have been a lot cooler to me tbh. Medieval wars. Would die in matter of seconds. Worth it. Would probably actually die slowly of your infected wounds, as your enemy wouldn't want to waste time and energy finishing you off knowing you couldn't fight anymore anyway. Dinosaurs. Can you imagine a creature the size of a blue whale but walking around? Hundreds of them. How crazy they look like with their spine plates, long necks, giant jaws. Would be incredible to walk next to them, or ride them. Well, the blue whale is still the largest living animal in Earth's history, so a dino the size of a blue whale is nothing you'd see. Still freaking huge though. The 20s. I may not be having fancy parties like Gatsby per se, but I'd figure it out. I dream of the 20s. It's one of my favorite decades to study. Don't imagine anyone's going to say a pre-internet world, but having been there, it was quite nice. Serious answer though. Surfing Hawaii before it got crowded, and before the GoPro was invented. I like to say that, while they really do make life simpler in so many ways, pre-cell phone world was a great place to live, having to make a plan and stick to it to meet the person you plan to meet, or better yet, meeting someone in person and talking to their face to make plans. Flying on the Concorde. The swinging, bluesy and general awesomeness of the 40s and 50s music scene in New Orleans. If I'm not mistaken, this would actually be in the 20s and 30s, but I get what you're saying. 40s and 50s were the bebop era. Woodstock. I was there, kind of. My mother went whilst pregnant with me. I heard it in utero. I would have liked to go to a Led Zeppelin concert. My dad saw Led Zeppelin when they first toured the US. He said that nobody really knew what to expect and the stadium was half empty. When they started, they played 3 or 4 songs into each other. Over 15 minutes of a wall of killer sound. When they broke for applause, there was a pause because everyone was in awe. Then the stadium erupted. I would love to be alive in the American Wild West. Meet Wild Bill, Doc Holliday and Wyatt Earp. I'd love to see how lawless it truly was. I have a sneaking suspicion that it was not nearly as lawless as most people think, and that a lot of the stories of bandits and lawmen and gunslingers were famous precisely because they were unusual, or were just made up out of whole cloth for the penny dreadfuls. I'd go back just long enough to really get to know my mom as an adult. She died when I was young and I just miss that I never got to have an adult connection with her. I've always wondered if we'd still get along. Seeing a TV for the first time back when they were brand new must have been pretty mind-blowing. I'd love to have been around back then to experience that. I remember getting our first color TV. It was pretty mind-blowing. Quaaludes. Either that or the stereotypical Chinese smoke den. That'd be so cool. Gladiator battles. I mean, now we have a society which agrees that they are violent and immoral, but I think if we all lived in a time and place where battles to the death were socially acceptable forms of entertainment, I think they would have been a true spectacle. Think of all the various themed battles which may have gone on 1v1 with your favorite champion, all-out melees, 10 gladiators versus 3 lions, historic battle reenactments, Cavalry versus the Horde. I get kinda excited thinking about the possibilities. And if it were real, authentic battles with the ultimate stakes on the line taking place, I think something deep and primal would awaken within each of us. Being in the audience of a gladiator battle would be, for me, the greatest, most glorious spectator experience. I would have loved to see the events where they filled the Colosseum with water and had naval battles. I'd love to witness the Battle of the Alamo in person, from a safe distance. Would have liked to see Halley's Comet. I'll be too old to see it when it comes back. Samuel fricking Clemens. The only thing we share is that we were both born when the comet flew overhead. I hope we share the same death, too, when the comet flies again. 70s era phone hacking. Sexual revolution before AIDS emerged. As a gay man who lived through this era, I was always conservative. I didn't want other STDs either, so I only had some minor indiscretions. Never got HIV. I'm 62 today. Seeing the Beatles play together. Or just living in that time period and waiting for the next Beatles album to be released. Seeing Queen perform Live with Freddie Mercury. My first ever rock concert was Queen at the RDS in Dublin on their Live Colours tour in 1979. I was 9 years old and standing up in the front row. Freddie arrived on stage, sitting on Superman's shoulders, a regal cape around his shoulders, as the band launched into We Will Rock You. 35 years later and no live experience has come close to topping that moment. The collapse of the Soviet Union. The Berlin Wall coming down. The Apollo moon landing. The original Star Wars films first coming out in the cinema. I have always wanted to see a drive-in movie. It sounds so much more cuddly than sitting with your so in those uncomfortable movie theater seats surrounded by strangers. It is. Where I live, we still have them. A few things. Life as an Etruscan. America before Europeans showed up. Traveling cross-country in the 1920s, 1940s. The free love hippie movement during the late 60s. The rise of punk and hardcore music and culture during the late 70s and throughout the 80s. And I would have liked to have been in college learning computer programming in the 90s. Instead, I was going through adolescence with a complete lack of guidance. Massive amounts of LSD in the 60s, going to Woodstock and seeing Jerry Garcia and the Dead but downplaying the whole Vietnam War thing. Jerry Garcia, FTFY. To see Michael Jordan playing for the Bulls. I was born 1995, so I couldn't experience his prime. As someone who hated the Bulls in the 90s, he was just ridiculous. Like a basketball player with an aimbot. What my mum and dad were like together before they broke up. I still don't know why it happened and why so much love turned into so much hate for each other. There's a lot I'd like to do. This is assuming I could go back in time and with reasonable resources adapt into the society I traveled to. Paris, France in the 20s to party with Hemingway. Prussia and Germany before the wars. India as a British officer in the Victorian era. Heck, all the exotic colonies as a British officer in the Victorian era. 80s black barbershop still stands in 2015 as something I'll never experience. Roman orgies. Venice and Florence in the Renaissance. Casablanca and North Africa during World War II. Discovering something in North America, like sailing up the St. Lawrence for the first time. Klondike Gold Rush. I'd probably die and have terrible horrible diseases, but it would be fun and interesting. Walking uphill both ways to everything. Can't help but feel like I missed out on some sick calf gains. Flying before 9/11. I'm just about to turn 21 now, so I was born in the mid-90s. Pretty much since I was 12 years old I've had some sort of cell phone, yet it was a crappy flip phone at first, but they rapidly moved on to smartphones that everybody has today. I doubt many people my age would agree with me, but sometimes I think I'd like to have lived in a time without all this technology. Don't get me wrong. It's awesome and amazing what we can do. I can be out in the woods and ask my phone how to recognize this animal or that one. I can find out how to rebuild a motor from a YouTube video, etc. But the downside is that everybody uses technology all the time. Nobody really takes a break. I sometimes see I'm on vacation and turning my cell phone off for the weekend. or something similar, but then they keep it on for emergencies or some other reason. We all have to be instantly connected to the rest of the world now, and sometimes I think it would be nice to not be, and not be weird for it. Sure, I could drop my cell phone plan, get rid of my internet and live in a cabin in the woods, but now that I know what I'd be living without, it would take some serious getting used to and adjustments in my life. It would be nice to just have not known about all this and lived in a time without all this stuff. You have been visited by Post Doggo. Don't worry, you do not need to comment to have good luck. Post Doggo only came to give you good vibes and to wish that your crush or whoever you want texts you. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check out another video, or don't. Either way, have a great day, you magnificent people.